fashion. So Tanzania is a country, one of the largest countries in Africa and the largest in East Africa.
To benefit.
It has been a very peaceful, politically stable.
We have tried to identify
Tanzania boasts one of the fastest growing economies in the world and in Africa.
The new businesses.
Tanzania is a founding member of the Southern African Development Community, SADC, and as well the Eastern African Community, EAC. It is strategically located as a logistical gateway to the southeast and Central African regions. Tanzania has a population of slightly over 50 million people. And the Tanzanian government vision 2025 is titled Nurturing Industrialization for Economic Transformation and Human Development. This fits very well with the theme of this year IEEE AFRICON.
There are 4 areas.
Tanzania is significantly invested on engineering, capacity building, ICT,
and Wi-Fi,
transport infrastructure, and energy.
ISP service.
Next slide, please.
Using fiber networks, where we get also the SGLSD.
So why AFRICON in Arusha?
So these are the type
Sadly,
of that
it is
are
virtual.
But also we are trying
Arusha is a city located in the northern Tanzania. It is a world-renowned Tanzanian principal safari city. It has excellent conference venues and experience to host large international conferences. It is about 40 kilometers from the Kilimanjaro International Airport, with excellent flight connection within Africa, Europe, Asia, and Americas. Arusha and Tanzania in general, we received strong support from key stakeholders, from the local academic institutions, for example, the Nelson Mandela African Institution of Science and Technology, NIMS, University of Dar es Salaam, College of ICT, the State University of Zanzibar, and the University of Dodoma. Yeah, we all know the plight of the COVID-19 pandemic. That's the reason why we are doing this virtually. But in spirit, we are hosting it in Arusha. Next slide, please.
Digitally excluded communities to rural in rural areas. So you can see
So about IEEE AFRICON, AFRICON is a flagship IEEE Regional 8 conference.
Value-added services is very important.
AFRICON is hosted in every 2 years.
There is also the issue of
and the last one was held in Accra, Ghana in 2019. And that is the time when the host city for AFRICON 2021 was announced. The decision to select Arusha, Tanzania as a host and a country was made way back between 2017 and 2019. The AFRICON 2021 Organizing Committee would like to thank the IEEE Regional 8 Conference Subcommittee for making the decision to award Arusha to be the host city. Next slide.
These broadband networks and the SMMEs that they own, who owns it.
So AFRICON 2021 has got several co-sponsors, and the AFRICON 2021 committee would like to thank the support received from the following co-sponsors. IEEE Tanzania subsection, which is 45% sponsor of this conference, the Nelson Mandela African Institution of Science and Technology, NMS, 40% sponsor, and the IEEE Region 8, which is 15%
we would like to bring
sponsor of the conference.
With affordable connectivity.
Next slide.
To the smart rural communities. That we are trying to do.
So we also received some support from the patrons. Our bronze
This is very important.
Patron is called Matrix Systems Corporation of United States of America. It's a company which makes telecommunication equipment. Got a long history of making very good
in the previous
original equipment for various telecommunication functions. Thank you, Matrix Systems, for extending your support to AFRICON 2021.
And
next slide, please.
Opportunity to rural areas with opportunity to grow their economies, with opportunity.
So we also received institution support from various organizations within Tanzania and outside. I would like to extend the AFRICON 2021 committee thanks to the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, South Africa, CSIR, University of Dodoma, Tanzania, University of Dar es Salaam of Tanzania, the State University of Zanzibar.
Optimize the utilization.
Next slide, please.
And there is also a whole lot of industry and business aspect.
So we have a very, very
research papers
tight technical program.
The CSIR and Ericsson.
We have technical symposia and with 135 papers to be presented by various authors from universities in Africa, mainly in Europe, and some research organizations. Each presenter of a technical symposia paper will be given 15 minutes and 5 minutes for Q&A session. We have 12 world-class, world-renowned keynote and keynotes from various institutions in Tanzania, outside of Tanzania, Africa and Europe, from Europe. Each keynote speaker will be given 45 minutes, including question and answer sessions. We have tutorials, which already started from yesterday. Actually, all of them, they are conducted yesterday. And each tutorial presenter will given 3 hours for their presentation, including Q&A sessions. We have a number of workshops. Each workshop presenter or presenters will be given 3 hours in their session, including Q&A. We also have special sessions, which are 2. And we need to likewise, they'll be given 3 hours presentation, including the Q&A session. For more information about the full program, you can go to the conference website. Next slide, please.
Together with accelerated digital.
So this is our conference schedule in a nutshell. It shows
scaling up this
activities throughout the 3 days of the conference.
10 more.
You can see that there will be a number of keynotes throughout, special sessions and workshops, and other activities, including the award ceremony on the 15th.
For water, for agriculture.
Next slide, please.
And there's a lot of mining, for example, in South Africa, which requires this type of.
So as I mentioned, we have a number of world-renowned keynote speakers. Yesterday we had a keynote address from the CEO of CSIR South Africa, Dr. Tulani Dlamini, the president and the CEO of IEEE, Susan Katie Land. Today we're going to have Professor Antonio Luque, who's the director of IEEE Region 8. We're going to have Professor James Maina from the University of Pretoria, South Africa.
So that
we had Professor Gerard Fatweis, the Vodafone chair, and the Professor TU Dresden, Germany. We'll have Mr. Thomas Ramanauskas, who is the managing partner of Envision Associates. Professor Dr. Engineer Vedashan Grace Masanja.
So if
she's a full professor of mathematics and computation from the Nelson Mandela African Institute of Science and Technology in Tanzania. Mr. Richard Makungwa, who is the CEO of Mwalimu Commercial Bank PLC of Tanzania. Dr. Tandeka Elengson, She's the CEO of Moses Kotani Institute in South Africa. Dr. Mohamed Zishan Shakir, a professor at the University of West Scotland, UK. Dr. Magnus Ewerbring, who is the CTO of Ericsson in the Asia Pacific region. Miss Linnea Beckman, who is the CEO of Solar Bora AB from Sweden.
The question and answers maybe for the next
slide,
so that we can go directly to Bill's presentation, William's presentation.
So our technical symposia themes, artificial and computational intelligence, energy efficiency, cloud computing, and multimedia systems, cloud computing, small data, and big data engineering.
Does everyone see it?
Communication networks, innovations for digital transformation and industrial development. Industrial electronics, control, autonomous system instrumentation, and consumer applications. Power and energy systems. And our papers from various authors covers the broad area around these themes. Next slide. So we also have excellent special session, tutorial, and workshops. And the themes, we have the 4th Developing Countries Robotic Forum, Sustainable Broadband Connectivity and Digital Entrepreneurship for Africa, Technology for Humanity and the Restoration of Biodiversity, which is a special session.
There you go. Perfect.
Tutorial on advanced monitoring, protection, and control of smart distribution grid.
Very quickly.
Tutorial on performance evaluation of networks, grids, and clouds by Colored Petrinet. A workshop on IEEE standards for the future of Africa, and another workshop on the challenge-driven education, a framework for sustainable development of Africa in ICT.
We're a systems integrator and a manufacturer of communication systems, and we make TV white space equipment. And we're recently
we have a very dedicated and innovative conference committee
system. Testing system,
which of course we have honorary chairs who are the IEEE president and CEO, and IEEE Regional 8 director.
Slide, please.
Yes, 1 moment. I'm trying.
Okay.
I'm the co-general chair, myself and Dr. Shubi Kaijage from Nelson Mandela African Institution of Science and Technology. We have organizing committee chair, who is myself again. And we have finance and registration chair, Dr. Dina Mfupe from Nelson Mandela African Institute of Science and Technology. We have the TPC and publication chair, Dr. Joyce Mwangama, who is the program director from UCT, South Africa, Dr. Konstantinos Ketsis from European University of Cyprus, Dr. Olutayo Erindi from VETS, South Africa. We have keynote and sponsorship chair, Dr. Zaipuna Yona from IEEE Tanzania subsection, Dr. Dennis Mwighusa, the chair of IEEE Tanzania subsection. Dr. Fisea Mekuria from CSR South Africa is an advisor. We have public relation chair headed by Dr. Edith Luhanga, and from Nelson Mandela African Institution of Science and Technology Tanzania, and Dr. Titus Simsamba from IEEE Tanzania. We have student paper contests chaired by Professor Vera from IEEE Regional 8 SAC, Mr. Matogoro from UDOM, Dr. Basil Ramba from CB Tanzania. Publicity publication chairs also headed by Dr. Mwangama, Dr. Machuve, Dr. Simsamba, and Ms. Nosipo Kumalo, who is our web software developer. We have track chairs, Professor Bagula, Dr. Ernest from DIT, Professor Thomas Olwal from TUT, South Africa, Professor Adebayo Yusuf from UNISA, South Africa, Mr. Rishan Reddy from CSR, South Africa, Dr. Moholo So from UCT, and we have a team of advisors, Professor James Maina from UCT, UP, South Africa, Dr. Fisea from CSR, Dr. Mutafungwa from Alto, Finland, Dr. Mjumo from VETS, Dr. Machuve, Professor Mnyuiva, Professor Lucho, Mr. Peter Nagy from IEEE Region 8, Dr. Kaijage from NMAST, Dr. Vikas Monabim from IEEE Region 8, and Professor Rai from Zanzibar. I guess I didn't miss NNM. Next slide, please.
And on the top and the bottom of the presentation, I have
so the outcomes, why we want to hold AFRICON 2021 in Tanzania. Of course, we would like to the theme of the Tanzanian government vision, the theme of the conference.
So we're starting off.
Both of them, they focus on industrialization development. And so this would be a very good forum for linking, creating linkages between the government of Tanzania, of course, supporting local and regional research and education institutions. It will also enhance regional educational research and innovation capacity in IEEE technology areas of interest. It's an opportunity to link global technology companies with their local counterparts and education institutions. It will also have, it will boost the local IEEE membership in Tanzania, development campaigns and creating awareness of membership benefits. Formation of IEEE East Africa section, which will improve IEEE Africa activities, improvement and involvement in a multitude of efforts by African Union Commission to sustainable technology development in Africa. And also we believe that IEEE will exhibit its worldwide activities and future plans for improving membership in Africa, and IEEE supporting activities for education, research, and development in the science and technology areas. Next slide.
And of course, the ability to support diverse customer requirements.
So this is my last slide. I would like to welcome you again. Karibuni wote.
When it comes
Asante
to the integration,
sana.
there's always going to be some type of software required, and that could be done at the integrator provider level. But the equipment itself,
thank you, Dr. Mfupe, for opening the conference and giving us more information about AFRICON 2021.
So it's just
our next speaker is the director of, the chair of the IEEE Tanzanian subsection, Dr. Dennis Mwighusa.
And I think we're looking at another 100 this year.
Dr. Mwighusa is currently not on the call.
Service has already started in the US.
So while we get a hold of him, let me have our next speaker, Dr. Antonio Luque, who is the director of IEEE Region 8. So Dr. Antonio Luque is a member and senior member of the IEEE. He received the MSc and PhD degrees in electrical engineering from the University of Seville in Spain in 2000 and 2005, respectively. He currently holds the position of associate professor in the Department of Electronics Engineering at the University of Seville. He has authored 20 journal papers, 40 conference papers, 3 book chapters, and a textbook, in addition to supervising 2 PhD students and an invited researcher and teacher at the Swiss. It's quite a lot to do while still directing the Region 8 of IEEE. So over to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction. I would like to share my screen. Yeah, so I'm really happy to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation to address all of you during this opening ceremony. Of course, we will all love to be physically in Arusha in Tanzania, but as this is not possible, it's also good that we can meet together in this virtual environment. So as the General Chair of the conference already mentioned, AFRICON is one of the flagship conferences of IEEE Region 8. Region 8 covers the whole of Africa, the whole of Europe and Middle East. And I will be talking a little bit about what is Region 8, what are the members here, what are the things that we do, and especially how you can participate. And I will also talk about IEEE in general, so that we all know what is this organization and what are the type of things that we try to do in order to advance technology for humanity. So we'll start talking about IEEE. We have a lemma, a motto, which is advancing technology for humanity. And we typically like to say that IEEE is the world's largest technical professional organization, which is dedicated to this aim, advancing technology for the benefit of humanity. So it's advancing technology is something good, but it's not something which happens in the vacuum, but we try to do that to benefit the whole of humanity. One of the main ideas in IEEE is that we create a global community where everybody is welcome and where we try to innovate. And this innovation happens in different ways. For example, by creating, sharing publications, by hosting conferences like this, where exchanges of knowledge can happen between people working in similar fields, by creating standards that define how different technologies can interoperate, and also through professional and educational activities that increase the training, increase the capabilities of the members and the public in general. So at the end, the key points of belonging and participating in such an organization are to have access to information which is at the forefront of technology, to have opportunities of networking with other people, with similar interests, who are in the same profession, and also there are specific member benefits that you can access if you join IEEE. I would like to, among all these things, I would like to highlight one specific aspect that is relatively recent, which is the commitment to diversity. So the IEEE Board of Directors in November 2019 approved a statement that made IEEE commit to foster technological innovation, but specifically by bringing together the talents, the different perspectives, the different views of people who have probably different personal, cultural, and disciplinary backgrounds. What this means is that everything that we do in IEEE and we will do in the future of IEEE will try always to take into account the diversity of our members. For example, we try to promote a culture which is inclusive and that welcomes and engages and brings together everybody who contributes to the field, regardless of any specific thing. Everybody is very welcome. And I think this is a really important step that recognizes that the world is diverse, that people come from different backgrounds, from different countries, sources, different types of people, and everybody is welcome to contribute. So this should be something that permeates the whole organization and it's present in everything that we do as an organization. Now let's talk a little bit about how IEEE is organized in the world, and in particular in this place in the world where this conference is happening. So the world is divided according to IEEE and the membership into 10 different regions. And Arusha, Tanzania, and Africa happens to be part of Region 8, which also covers Middle East and Europe, as I mentioned. So Region 8 is the largest geographically region in the whole of IEEE. You can see here in this map on the right-hand side of the screen that covers big part of the world, right? And also has a big number of members, 70,000 members, that are distributed in more than 100 countries. So you can have an idea of the diversity that we have in this region. These members are organized in 59 sections that typically cover one country. There are a few exceptions, but typically the sections cover one country. We also have 11 subsections, of which Tanzania is one of them. And we have one geographic council, which is indeed Africa Council, which covers most of the African continent. Among these 70,000 members, 20,000 of them are student members, and this is really important. Students are the future of the profession, the future of technology, and the future of engineering, and we try to make them participate in as many activities as possible so that they are prepared to be this future of the profession. But also there are different types of organization, because this big number of members, this huge geographical area needs to be organized in different ways. So we have more than 600 chapters. Chapters unite members who live in more or less the same place and who have more or less the same interests. So people living in the same area and that work in the same area of engineering or of technology are united in one chapter. We also have almost 700 student branches, which are student members who are having their formation, they're pursuing a degree in one specific university or college. So almost 700 of them spanning more than 60 countries. We have the intersection of both. We see more than 400 student branch chapters. That means students in one university that also have one specific interest, for example, optics or electron devices or robotics or computer science. And more than 100 affinity groups, and these are growing very fast. Affinity groups are groups that are not of technical interest in nature, but other type of interest. For example, people who are more or less of the same age or are more or less on the same stage of their career, either beginning their career or close to retirement or already retired. These people who have these things in common can unite in affinity groups. So you can see, you can have here an idea of the whole breadth of the span of IEEE in general and in Region 8 in particular. And looking more closely to the area where that is hosting this AFRICON, we can talk a little bit about Africa, about the African continent. There are more than 6,000 IEEE members in the African continent, of which almost half of them, 2,900, are student members. And you can see here on the left-hand side the distribution in the different grades of membership. So more than 200 senior members, more than 2,000 members, and 15 fellows in the continent. Of them, 74% are male, 14% are female, and 12 of them we don't know their gender. These members are organized in the African continent, as I mentioned, in one geographical council, which covers most of the continent, 11 sections and 6 subsections, and you can see this colored in blue, the sections and the subsections colored in blue in the map on the right-hand side of the screen. As I mentioned, Tanzania is one of the subsections in the African continent. We also have more than 200 chapters, 22 affinity groups, and 164 student branches in the continent. So you can see an idea, or you can have an idea of the amount of activity and things that are happening around the country. In this continent and also in Region 8, there are many different activities happening, and we don't have time to mention all of them. Many other conferences that are happening, activities for industry members, activities for young professional, educational activities, promoting diversity, creation of standards, lots of things.
I am sorry that I don't have slides to share. I prepared sort of a speech, so maybe I will be reading from what I've prepared, or if it is okay with you, then I can share the speech. Hello?
Yes, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I don't have much to say, but a lot have been said by Dr. Luzango Mfupe, but it is so sad that we have not managed to meet physically in Arusha. As we all understand that one of the agenda in this conference was to visit some of the good places in Arusha, but still encouraging you guys, if one day you're interested to come and see the beautiful Tanzania, then IEEE will be there to assist. Honorable President of IEEE and CEO Susan Land, IEEE Regional 8 Director Antonio Luque, Past Chairman IEEE Tanzania Dr. Zaipuna Yona, Co-General Chair and Organizing Chair Dr. Luzango Mfupe, Co-General Chair Dr. Shubi Kaijage, other committee chairs headed by Dr. Dina Machuve and Dr. Joyce Mangama, honorable distinguished speakers and guests, conference participants, particularly those from outside of Tanzania, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of IEEE Tanzania, I'm pleased to welcome you to the 15th IEEE AFRICON. I think this is the 15th one, if I'm not mistaken. Even though the conference first started in 1990s, but this is the first time it has been held in Tanzania. But of course, it is also the first IEEE African Virtual Conference since its establishment. So many thanks to the initiatives made by the past chairman of IEEE Tanzania, Dr. Zaipuna, in making sure that the event is taking place in Tanzania and is being successful. We express our deep gratitude to all sponsors, IEEE Region 8, Nelson Mandela, African Institution of Science and Technology, and IEEE Tanzania. We highly appreciate the dedicated work of the local organizing committee, consisting of staff and faculty of co-organizing universities. So our special thanks and special efforts were put by the team of NMIST, supporters such as the Council for Science and Industrial Research, University of Dodoma, State University of Zanzibar, and University of Dar es Salaam. So many thanks to Dr. Luzango Mfupe and his team for their total support. They actually all worked together and extremely hard for the same goal, to prepare an outstanding conference. As a result, this is the conference featured world-class panel speakers, major technical symposiums, industry and academic panels, workshop, tutorials, and invited tracks. We express sincere gratitude to our international peer review team who volunteered and allocated a big chunk of their time to review papers. Their contribution is invaluable. Many thanks also goes to authors for their understanding and passions. Talking of IEEE Tanzania subsection, currently we are 22 active members and 4 senior members with 2 student members. So still we are lagging behind, because as I was looking through the member details in the IEEE platform, it is seen that since IEEE Tanzania subsection started, we have more than 165 members who have had once at least had their membership in IEEE. But this number has been decreasing due to some reasons that we are now working upon to make sure that at least we get a good number of members in our country. But a lot of things needs to be done, such as publicity, because you find most of the members, they can't differentiate between the IEEE, ERB, IET, and some other professional organizations. So we really need to tell these guys on the importance of IEEE and what can it do in terms of their professional career. So under the theme that we have in this IEEE AFRICON 2021 conference, contributing to the industrialization of Africa through innovations in science and technology, I think there is a need to situate science, technology, and innovation within a broader political and economic framework with an emphasis on the role and structure of the state in the process of industrialization. There has been recently a surge interest in the role of science and technology in African development. These initiatives have not only been made by government and regional bodies, but also by social scientists preoccupied with the broader question of socio-economic development and change in Africa. Science, technology, and innovation have had a profound impact on the way we live, and IEEE AFRICON is pleased to have been a partner in the growth of these technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, conferences such as these provide a valuable opportunity for research scientists, industrial specialists, and decision makers to share experiences. I am grateful to the many experts who have come to share their knowledge with us in this event. I also welcome the many representatives from government, academic institutions, industrial associations, and non-government organizations who have joined us. Through technology, we shall be able to communicate with one another. This is what we are doing. This is what we have done since yesterday, irrespective of the distance. We shall see and hear one another as perfectly as we were face to face. Despite intervening distance of 1,000 miles, online conferences such as this one also enables the sharing of ideas among wider audiences, increasing participation and contribution. The meeting is more accessible for everyone who needs to be there. It doesn't matter whether you are in your country or in another country, you can still join and continue the session. So the impressive interest we are witnessing is just a mere reflection of the anticipation and hope that digital transformation is inevitable. As IEEE, there is a great demand for our services. With that, I am sure we shall have fruitful and rewarding exchanges in this conference. I wish all of us most successful and impactful conference, and I look forward to learning about the outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dennis Mwighusa, for that presentation. And there was a question for the regional director. He did respond, but maybe for the benefit of the streaming audience. The question was, how can IEEE support one, multidisciplinary R&D, research and development, and innovations to support the fourth industrial revolution development in Africa? And two, what is the role of IEEE to support, accelerate research and development for the UN Decade of Biodiversity Restoration?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. So as I mentioned, the role of IEEE is to promote research and development by the many activities that we organize, the type of services that we provide. So for example, by this publication that allow the exchange of knowledge, by organizing this type of conference, which allow people to exchange ideas, to exchange knowledge and developments, by creation of standards and so on. But typically IEEE doesn't directly fund R&D projects. This is not something that we typically do, even maybe could be some specific exceptions to that. For example, projects on humanitarian technologies, this type of things we could do, but typically projects that are directly on R&D are not funded by IEEE. There are other organizations which are in charge of that. In order to make all this information more available, I'm aware, for example, that we have a program to make IEEE Explore, the digital library, accessible, affordable to African institutions and universities so that everybody can benefit for the vast amount of knowledge which is published there. And there are other this type of initiatives by exchanging information. So even if I don't have a specific example for these specific things that this individual is asking, the general idea is that by promoting this exchange of knowledge, we contribute to the innovation, to advancing the technology. I hope that this answer is fine. But if anybody has any other question, feel free to write me. My email is there.
We can't hear you.
Okay, sorry. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you for the response, and I have shared your email address with the conference participants. So next on the agenda, we will be taking a short break, and then after the break, we will be diving into some of the keynote presentations. During this break, I will be playing some of the cultural videos that highlight Tanzania, the country, and the different diversities and cultures. So please stay on the line and please keep viewing the stream. All right. So next on the program, can everybody hear me? Hello? Yes, okay. So next on the program will be our keynote presentations. Our first keynote speaker is Prof. Dr. Engineer Vernanda Grace Masanja. She's a full professor of computational mathematics at the School of Computational and Communication Science and Engineering at the Nelson Mandela African Institute of Science and Technology. So Dr. Masanja, Professor Masanja. Professor Masanja, you can give your address.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I got lost a bit.
Sorry.
Yes, I got connected a bit, but I'm back. Thank you very much.
And please turn on your camera.
Okay.
Thank you.
So first of all, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by thanking the organizing committee for thinking that I'm worthy making a presentation at this conference to you participants. The conference theme is contributing to the industrialization of Africa through innovations in science and technology. And the organizers have chosen the topic for me to be African girls and women preparedness for the fourth industrial revolution. I think this topic is pertinent at this juncture when public and private sectors of the African countries are now beginning to embrace the fourth industrial revolution in the production sectors as well as in the service delivery sectors. By implication, the industrialization process of African countries need to embrace the fourth industrial revolution technologies where both men and women are playing roles equally. Hence, my talk will start by briefly talking about the impact of the fourth industrial revolution on Africa and African countries' preparedness for adoption of the fourth industrial revolution. Then I will talk about the opportunity the fourth industrial revolution brings with it for girls and women to acquire skills for that revolution in equal numbers or even higher than men. Finally, I will propose what the IEEE and the academia can do to promote female access and participation in related education and careers that require knowledge and skills for the fourth industrial revolution innovations. I begin by talking about the impact of the fourth industrial revolution on Africa's preparedness for adoption of the fourth industrial revolution. The potential of the fourth industrial revolution to transform the economies and service delivery and structural transformation in African countries is enormous. Africa realizes that for the continent to attain global competitiveness, it is imperative to embrace the fourth industrial revolution in its models of innovation, in its production, manufacturing, entrepreneurship, and service delivery systems, such as education, health, transportation, water and sanitation, and the like. Reports, for example, by GSM Association of 2019 highlight that the model technologies and services have generated 1.7 million direct jobs in both formal and informal sectors, and this has contributed to 8.6% of the GDP of Sub-Saharan Africa. It has also contributed to US $15.6 billion to the public sector through taxation. It has supported almost 3.5 million jobs in 2018. The projections by the GSM Association indicate that by 2023, that is in 2 years to come, the contribution of technologies will reach almost US $185 billion. And this will be 9.1% of the GDP of Sub-Saharan Africa. As a result of digitalization, financial systems and labor markets have greatly increased their efficiency, their certainty, and security, resulting in economic growth and increased job creation. It is observed that the spread of digital technologies is empowering the rural and marginalized groups with access to information, job opportunities, and services, and these are improving their standards of living. The United Nations Economic Commission for Africa report of 2015 reported that the informal sector is estimated to constitute 55% of Sub-Saharan Africa's GDP, and that the fourth industrial revolution tools are already playing a transformational role in increased financial inclusion and hence have the potential for employment creation. Actually, it was estimated that one additional technology job creates 5 new jobs in the local non-tradable sectors. Africa is slowly moving towards smart and precision farming, which alone accounts for 60% of total employment in Sub-Saharan African countries. The food system is projected to add more jobs than the rest of the economy between 2010 and 2025. On-farm activities represent almost 50% of all rural income in many African countries. And access to information on competitive pricing, monitored crop information, disease prevention, and disaster mitigation support will drastically transform the agricultural sector and business-to-business growth in the agro-processing industry. In the service sector, for example, health, already the fourth industrial technology is seen to have a huge potential to help African countries mitigate the numerous health challenges they are facing and build sustainable health care systems. And in various areas such as information management systems, access and acquisition of medical data, taking symptoms, and communicating under quarantine using drones to deliver blood and drugs, to remove reagents, etc. They already are transforming what is happening in the health sector. Now, when we go to industrialization per se, we see already this is the priority of many African countries. In most of African countries, in their development plans, they have prioritized industrialization as the engine of the growth of the economies. This is also clearly stated in the agenda, the Africa Agenda 2063. If we take the example of the East African community countries, they said to raise the contribution of manufacturing industries from around 8.9 in 2015 to reach 25% in 2030. 2. Such a drastic increase can be gained if they invest in industrial digital technologies and bridge the extremely large skills gap and the existing skills mismatch. Practically, all jobs across the manufacturing sector will be requiring digital skills. Most of the workforce will have left the education systems, and therefore, in the short to medium term, those people who are already in employment will need to be upskilled or reskilled in the workplace. And such training will also need to take place across the board among professional workers, unskilled workers whose jobs will otherwise be out, among managers who will need to become more data literate, and in the creation of new roles, particularly in areas such as artificial intelligence, programming, and data analytics. And while some technologies like robotics require completely different skill sets at a completely different level, with artificial intelligence and automation being the major skill shift. Now, let me talk about the opportunity the fourth industrial revolution brings with it for girls and women to acquire skills for the fourth industrial revolution. The fourth industrial revolution technologies tend to replace low-skilled workers with higher skilled workers, calling for investing in education and reskilling programs to ensure technology replaces labor, but also it supplements labor. Now, all jobs across all the sectors, including farming, will be requiring digital skills. In rural African countries, women and girls form the majority of farmers. African countries are implementing free education for all programs where boys and girls are getting free primary and secondary education. And the gender parity at both primary and secondary school level now has been really attained in most African countries. This means the working population, both male and female, is becoming better educated and prepared to seize the opportunities provided by the fourth industrial revolution. So it is estimated that the share of workers with at least a secondary education is set to increase from 36% in 2010 to 52% in 2030. And this estimation was done by the commissioned by the World Economic Forum and reported in 2017. Now, since both males and females will be having secondary education level in equal numbers, so the potential of both genders equally gaining the skills set needed for the fourth industrial revolution exists. Research, for example, by the OECD and the World Economic Forum forecast that elementary work, manual and low-skilled jobs, and jobs consisting of routine tasks will decline. Now, we know that women form the majority workers in these categories. Therefore, non-manual and highly skilled jobs will increase, while the demand for jobs that include programming is growing by 50% faster than the overall job market. Now, women are mainly in the categories of low-skilled jobs which consist of routine tasks. Now, since this will be declining and they will need to be replaced, it means more women who are in those jobs will need to be reskilled or even upskilled. So countries will need to ensure such women do not disappear from the workforce as a result of digitalization and the automation that will replace their jobs. Category of technical skills relevant for smart industrial specializations include the following. Skills which are relevant to developing production technologies. For example, advanced manufacturing technologies, advanced materials and nanotechnologies, life science technologies, and the like. Another category is skills relevant to developing digital technologies. These include macro, nano, electronics, photonics, and artificial intelligence, as an example. There are skills relevant to developing cyber technologies. For example, the digital security technologies and connectivity technologies. But also another category is basic digital technology skills. For example, the digital user skills. And then you have advanced digital technology skills. For example, skills relevant for IT professionals' occupations. Now, research shows that skills shortages are very large in all domains, meaning that a lot of training and skills building in these domains is needed. And that, to address them, new educational curricula and teaching methods will be needed across all educational levels, from university programs all the way down to primary education and even pre-primary education. Now, such training will also need to take place across the board among professional workers, unskilled workers whose jobs will be otherwise automated out, managers who will need to become more data literate, and in the creation of new roles, particularly in areas such as artificial intelligence and automation, programming, and data analytics. Some technologies like robotics will require a completely different skill set at a completely different level. Now, women need, girls and women need also be skilled or reskilled. If all the teachers need to gain these new skills so that they can teach their children. And we know that at pre-primary, primary, and even secondary level, majority of the teachers are women, and therefore all these, that is a good entry point that they will need to gain these skills so that they can transfer them to their students. But we need also to prepare those who will go into the higher levels, because there is no way we can get the critical mass that is needed if we rely only on men to be trained. We need to nurture all the brains that are ready to take up these jobs. So there is going to be a major skills shift, advancing production and service delivery forward with a more efficient workforce, safe operations, and maintaining high standards in the quality of production and service delivery. So this is where STEM, that is science, technology, engineering, mathematics experts, and particularly IEEE and teachers will be needed to take the lead. First, by ensuring they are skilled themselves and pioneer upskilling and reskilling the others from pre-primary to university level, and those in employment. Secondly, to ensure both male and female acquire needed skills, extra efforts are needed to interest girls and women to be champions in the fourth industrial revolution labor market. Now, I lastly talk about what IEEE together with academicians, especially those in STEM areas, can do. The question is why girls and women should be enticed in taking advantage of this opportunity. Data show that majority pre-primary, primary, and secondary school teachers are women, as I have said. And now we also know that majority of farmers are also women, and also women in other types of low-skilled work are majority in the low-skilled workforce. And all these will need reskilling or upskilling to remain in employment. But the reason why women and girls shy off the technologies are there. It is not by coincidence that the data which was given this morning by Professor Antonio, that members of IEEE in Africa, 74% are men, while 15% are female. This is not just a random appendix. This is the typical situation. And this typical situation is not only in the learning, in the schools, in the universities, it is also pertinent in our homes. At home, anything technological, even to change a bulb, the mother will call the son to come and change the bulb for her. She's using a blender, something goes wrong, just to call a boy or a man to come and do it. And this is not by coincidence. But we know that it is beneficial for the country to have girls and women enter the labor market of high-skilled, high-tech workforce. And to enter such a labor market requires sound education in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But despite decades of efforts to bridge the gender gap in STEM education and careers, women still remain grossly underrepresented in STEM fields. Globally, the number of women in these jobs generally hangs between 10 and 30%. And this is true also for Africa. Now, numerous studies have established that girls and women, they avoid STEM subjects and challenging careers in STEM because they erroneously believe that innate intelligence is needed for success in these fields, and also they erroneously believe that such innate intelligence is for boys and men and not for them. But meta-analysis studies have established that girls have the same smarts required for success in STEM education, careers as much as the boys have. And actually, in some cases, especially in the spatial areas, girls tend to perform better than boys. Girls and women are held back by perceiving themselves not capable to handling technology, not capable of performing well in STEM subjects and careers. And also everybody is telling them that these technologies, subjects, careers are for boys and men and not for them. They also don't see women in these careers. They don't see them in books. They don't see them in video games. In classroom, when the girls shy away from STEM subjects, this is taken as a normal thing, and teachers let them relax. At home, it is typical for females, grown-ups and children to expect males to handle anything that is to do with technology. So now the major task is to remove these self-perceptions. A good entry point that can be taken by IEEE and the academia is to address the self-perceptions by organizing programs and events which focus on highlighting the achievements of women and girls in STEM areas and sparking science interest in girls at school and home environments by involving teachers, parents, and role models. Organizing media events portraying female professionals in STEM fields can help a great deal. Showing young girls performing science experiments with the help of a female scientist mentor can also play a big role. Organizing boot camps which expose girls to hands-on maths and science experiments. Boot camps for coding. Boot camps where girls will be fabricating drones and robots. Where young girls playing with toys will be adding movement to the toys. Where they'll be playing, like using energy in cooking, things which women do, but in that one, they play producing solar panels, wind generated energy, and the like. All these will expose girls to science. It will expose them to the fundamentals of the fourth industrial revolution, and it will excite them so that they are able to think, they are able to acquire the skills which are needed for the fourth industrial revolution. But also, working with female STEM role models is something very important. At the Nelson Mandela African Institute of Science and Technology, where I am, there is a big club which is called STEMI, that is Science, Technology, Engineering, Mathematics, and Innovation, where young girls, young women like Neema Mduma, Edith Ruhanga, and so on and so forth, and students, they go out there, they meet the girls, they inspire them, and these have really played a great role in increasing the numbers of those girls who want to go into STEM fields. Now, role modeling can also be organized by inviting successful female STEM scientists, especially the young ones when you are dealing with young, but also the grown-ups when you are dealing with the grown-ups. And to have them go meet the girls, talk, and then see how they can connect and they can build networks that support each other. I think exposing also these girls to the women who have succeeded, the women inventors of the 17th century, 18th century, 19th century, 20th century, they are there. They are actually in the fourth industrial revolution, the breakthroughs, most of them started by women inventors. But also in most of what is being applied in our homes, it is women who wanted to reduce the labor. They are investing in the household chores. They really made great discoveries, inventions, innovations, which up to now, they have made life easy for us. So I think making sure that all the intelligence we have is tapped into is something which is worthwhile. And since we see that the number of women involved, you have 74% men, 14% women. The other 12% of unknowns, probably you'll find that more men are there than women. IEEE needs to step up, increase the number of women, send them out there to inspire girls, to inspire women in the village who are going to the smart farming, to inspire women who are going to be beneficiaries of all the fourth industrial revolution in the health sector, because up to now, they are still the majority will be caring for the youth and so on, and the young ones. And if that happens, then Africa is going to leapfrog and embrace the fourth industrial revolution and therefore gain the economic growth, tranquility, as well as well-being. Let me stop here and thank you indeed for listening.
Thank you, Professor Masanja, for a very impactful keynote. It's a very topical subject. This is really the encouragement of women to participate in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields. So as a woman myself in the STEM, I am quite interested to hear from you. What was it that inspired you, or what was it that encouraged you to actually pursue such a career, being now a full professor in computational mathematics? That's very inspirational. Do you remember a time when you just knew that you wanted a career in STEM, and how did you decide to follow such a path?
Thank you for that question. What I can say is that really it is destiny. The good thing is we thank God that I was performing very well. I was passing well all my subjects, and I was all round. That means I could go in any subject I wanted. So at some stage, I was thinking of just becoming a singer, because I used to sing very well, compose, do drama and so on and so forth. And obviously my parents did not like that. Even at that time, of course, nobody, we saw Elvis Presley, Dolly Parton and so on, but that was not really interesting. But then of course, when I was already in secondary school, normally they stream you into science and arts subjects. When you finish Form 2, I was streamed into science simply because they picked the best in science, they put them there, and then, yeah. But I wanted to be a medical doctor, but then I was, Form 5, I was put in mathematics, mathematics, physics, and chemistry. But then when I went to university, I remained in, I could either go to physics or math, then I went to mathematics. So at that time, really, it was not really like you are choosing, you are being streamed.
Okay, all right. And in your speech, you mentioned the importance of mentorship and exposing young girls and females to these careers and to whether past or present pioneers in the field that are themselves women. Why is this important, and how can we increase this these sorts of activities?
Actually, this, for example, interesting girls is so important that the moment they switch and think that I can do it, they do wonders. Now, role modeling is one aspect that basically changes people in a matter of a second. I can give an example. I was invited to start the Mathematical Association of Malawi, 1992. And while I was there, I stood in front of teachers in a teacher training college, a university which was teaching also teachers. But then there are also a lot of students there. I spoke for maybe 50 minutes, and that was it. But just by saying Dr. Verdiana Grace Masanja, PhD holder of mathematics, that was it. But even up to now, I get emails. In those times, I used to get letters sent to me to Tanzania, telling me that my daughter is now excelling in mathematics. She always talks about you. I was young, well, not as old as I am now, and I went very well dressed. And so you impress them by just the look, and then just mentioning PhD alone. So role modeling can do great wonders. I know some people, for example, I'll mention Nema Mduma. She's a young lady who got a PhD recently. She's in machine learning. She's inspiring many. I follow her on Facebook, on LinkedIn. She's really inspiring many. So just like that. Now, we are talking about things that IEEE can easily do. IEEE can easily organize boot camps. Girls like coding. Girls, it is young women who are selling on mobile phones. They are selling their products. It's so easy to interest them in using these technologies, in being innovative in these technologies, and making, they can teach pre-primary school teachers how to add a movement to a toy. So I think in this way, IEEE can basically choose activities that are doable, but which are impactful.
Okay. And for my last question or comment, which you can answer, but I also encourage some of the other speakers on the session to give in their input. I think that one of the things that many people consider that would encourage the participation or the increased participation of females in STEM is not just women who have made it in the field being the people who encourage these things, but also men in the field playing their role in supporting these activities rather than being against them, as well as parents of young girls, encouraging them to consider these sorts of things. So not just to you, Prof, but to the other keynote speakers, what is your opinion on having not just placing the responsibility of enforcing these advancements for girls being on the women who've already succeeded and made it in this field, but in the larger community and support structure of girls and females in STEM? Okay. So Dr. Luzango, Dr. Mwighusa, Prof. Ewerbring, if you have any comments, but Prof. Masanja, please go.
Okay, for your information, everybody has to play a role, especially the media. It is in the media where these notions of this is for men, this is for women are also perpetuated. And the teachers, the males, especially the fathers at home, that everybody needs to play a role. Also, if men go there as role models, the role modeling of the men would be really to show what they are doing for the girls. Because the role model, these children are looking at, they say, this is for men and it's not for me. So you have to undo it. Now, these other programs, they are there and they have been going on and so on, but the big change has to go to how do you change the mindset? So there is so much, not only for girls in STEM, generally, it's so much that needs to change. Reduce their chores at home, make sure they are not, distracted from studies, they get pregnant, they do that, but we focus now on the perception that make them not want to go for STEM. So I think everything really plays a big role. But my suggestion is, where do we start and what can we do that can have a big impact was in this which I've presented.
And Dr. Mfupe, do you have any comments on that?
Well, thank you, Program Director. And I concur with Professor Masanja. I think for speaking of men, and myself being a father of daughters, so I just have daughters and encourage them to take STEM from a very early age. And I can see the young one here, she's already too good in things which even myself, I forgot how to use them, some gadgets around. Most of the postgrad students that I've supervised myself are ladies in STEM. And speaking of the IEEE, for example, the AFRICON Organization Committee, you can see it yourself, Joyce, more than 50%, I believe, in the committee are ladies. So more than 50% of the chairs who are making impact, yourself, Dina, Edith. So I believe ladies can do it successfully, of course, with support from men. And the stereotyping of saying they can't do it, I think the things of the past. Now, most of the big corporations are hiring ladies at the top positions. Yesterday, we had a very good keynote address from the IEEE president, who happened to be a lady. So I think gone are the eras of stereotyping and making ladies feel inferior or something like that. And with the age of the 4IR now, and I believe we'll go to the 5th, more and more ladies will come on stream to lead us. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Prof. Masanja, there's one question from the audience. Firstly, thanking you for a great and inspiring talk. But what advice do you give to aspiring women who want to pursue a career, specifically in computational mathematics, as you have done? And what are the career path and opportunities available to them?
Okay, thank you for the question. The advice I'm giving to the girls is that they can do it. I know many girls who already go into the STEM subjects and they already select STEM. A huge number of them, they also drop out after going into the discipline because they fear, if I get married, then I'm going to bear children. Being an engineer, am I really going to do this? Am I really going to be that? So that they should not fear. Nowadays, it is not difficult. And now, as we are even embracing the 4th Industrial Revolution, they can do a lot without really competing. The time for children, the time for having babies, the time for nursing babies, and the time for doing their work. So I encourage them to continue to pursue their dream, and the future is in the technologies, and therefore, and mathematics, for example, still is the core, whether we like it or not. And if we don't have mathematics and mathematics professor, mathematics teachers, mathematics whatever, so there is nobody to teach mathematics, then unfortunately, even the engineering, technology, and so on is going to die. So I'll continue to encourage them. What is new? The new professions are those which are moving towards the fourth industrial revolution. Others are dying out. In Tanzania, just last week, the post office, which should have been closed down because they are not having anything to do or maybe very little to do, has been digitized, and therefore all the jobs now are going digital. Now they are going to have a lot of work to do. As we more and more go for automation, digitalization, and so on, I encourage girls to go there. Programming is going to be key. If Africa is really going to survive, we need good programmers, many of which we don't have anymore. This is the advice.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you for participating in the session. I think everything that you spoke about is quite important and very inspirational to have a person of your high esteem being a role model to many, including me, as I hope to be a full professor one day as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, so in the agenda, our next speaker is Magnus Ewerbring. Magnus, are you ready? Yes. So Magnus is the Chief Technology Officer for Asia Pacific. Magnus is responsible for driving technology alignment as well as long-term technology strategies for Ericsson in the Asia Pacific region. Magnus has been with Ericsson for more than 30 years and has held several senior executive positions within Ericsson research, development, and business units, as well as in customer accounts. Magnus also holds a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering from Chalmers University. So Magnus, thank you for participating in this conference, and we look forward to hearing your keynote address.
Thank you. It's delightful to be here. Yeah, I ask you to put up the slides. Meanwhile, I must say it's a great honor to speak directly after Professor Masanja. I truly admire her drive to bridge drive the inclusion across gender, and of course to embrace the evolution in society based on technology, then going into the fourth generation. In my presentation, I will focus on the evolution of the mobile cellular technology, in particular then now as we're going into the fifth generation, and its potential to society. It will drive significant innovation in society. And I think for Africa, it's a fantastic opportunity here to, from universities, embrace it early, make sure that students learn about it, learn about the innovation potential on top of the systems. Because more and more of the society will be driven over or delivered over wireless connections. And I argue, as time progresses, 5G will play a very important role there. Let's see, are we getting the slides or?
Yes, just one second.
Yeah, okay, that's okay. So I'll talk meanwhile. My first slide that was seen a bit here, we'll look at the different technology generations. And few observations. One is that a generation stays on for a very long time. Now, of course, there's a big movement upwards. And what we can see for every new generation that we introduce, the uptake rate goes faster. What's driving the uptake rate? One key thing is, of course, cost of the devices. The other one is very fundamental, namely that we have coverage for the services. Now let's see, do you switch the slides for me or do I do that? If I say next slide, if you do it for me, please.
Yes, I can do that.
Yeah, so let's go to the next one, please. Yeah, so here we have the prediction. This is from the Ericsson Mobility Report. Twice per year, we make a 5-year forecast of the number of subscriptions for the mobile systems. So you can see here by 2026, we believe that there will be 3.5 billion 5G subscriptions in the world. That's the orange part at the top. And you can see very quickly grows in its share. The green part is 4G, that's a dominant technology in 2026. And together with 5G, that's 85% of all the subscriptions. The purple and the blue is 3G and 2G, about equally large. Still sizable. It's well over a billion, almost 1.5 billion subscriptions. So it's still very much there. But you can see the trend, it's going upwards as device costs go down and the coverage for the services increases. People will want to upgrade. Why do they want to upgrade? Because the performance is so much better. You can connect to the internet and you can do so much more. One piece of evidence for that, 91% of all the subscriptions in 2026 are mobile broadband based. That is to say, they include a good connection to the internet. So people will be connected. People will be connected in large numbers. And given that, that will drive, of course, more and more innovation. Not shown in this slide is also the number of IoT connections that's added on top of it. We say in 2026, another 5.5 billion cellular IoT connections are to be added. So it's enormous numbers. Now, let's take the next slide, please. If you look a little bit on the regions here, I sub-selected Sub-Sahara, Middle East, North Africa, India, Southeast Asia, and Oceania. If we start from the right, Southeast Asia and India, reasonably equal. About 90% of all the subscriptions are 4G and 5G. And you can see a little bit of 3G, a little bit of 2G. If you look in Sub-Sahara, of course, 3G, 2G are the dominant. But again, if you're looking at what's the trend, I think look towards the right of the picture. As quickly as subscribers can upgrade to 4G subscription, they will do it because it's much better performance, more enjoyable to use the services. And when they can go to 5G, they will do so. If we look on the consumption on the right-hand side, we predict in 2026 that in India alone, 40 gigabytes per month will be consumed. That's an enormous amount of data. And you can see it's above the world average. Southeast Asia, about the same, 39 gigabytes. And then if I compare to Sub-Sahara, Sub-Sahara is significantly lower. Well, I argue that's because so many subscriptions are still on 2G and 3G. Okay, let it be so, but just extrapolate to where the trend is. There's no reason, I argue, why users wouldn't have a similar usage as in Southeast Asia or India in Sub-Sahara if I just would think they would have a affordable device and a good enough coverage, and of course a competitive price plan. But the appetite to consume the information, to be connected and use the internet with all of its promises is there. And I think we can see that clearly here, where they have good price points, where they have device penetration, it takes off very much so. Let's take the next slide, please. Another segment that is getting more and more traction is fixed wireless access. So instead, by deploying, let's say, a fiber to the homes, you can go to the curb and then use a wireless connection into the home. And it's really increasing more and more. Over 70% of all the operators around the world now have a fixed wireless access offer. In Africa and Middle East, it's about the same, 2/3, 67%. On 5G alone, we can see that among the operators that have launched 5G so far, it is a very high penetration. 87% of the operators that have launched 5G also have a fixed wireless access proposition. And indeed, the speeds you can get there are extraordinarily good, several hundred megabits per second. So there's a great potential here to increase the fixed internet penetration as well by using the wireless network. So there, for the operators, of course, this opens up new possibilities in their offerings. Okay, next one, please. Now, let's have a look on where we are with 5G. And of course, it starts in some markets where there's higher average return per user, ARPU, where they can afford the higher device cost, and then eventually it moves to market after market. But the rate of adaptation is very high. By midsummer here, we had some 170 mobile operators that had launched already. Over 900 different devices were launched. That's a significantly higher number after only 2 years in commercial service than for any other G. And the device cost is drastically going down. Already we see smartphones in the range of $150 to $200, and we know they're soon going to drop under that. So as the number of users comes up, of course, the device cost goes down. As one small of evidence for that, and the appetite for having these devices, I think, is India. India has yet to launch 5G. 5G spectrum, radio spectrum, is not issued yet. So you can only have a 4G subscription in India. But even so, India is the 4th largest market for 5G enabled smartphones. So the devices are coming in there, and once the spectrum will be auctioned and operators can launch it, the uptake will be very fast, I argue. Now, what can you expect when you launch it then? Well, you can see on the bins here in the middle to the left, the average usage per market. And if I take South Korea as an example, the usage for 5G users is up by 2.7 times. So very quickly, the early adopters of 5G consume more data. Why is that? The experience is so much better, and they start to use more advanced services. What kind of services do they use? Well, long term, we'll still have to see it. But you can see now immersive content. A lot of video, a lot of 3D videos and so forth, with goggles in some cases, VR, XR applications. And coming back to where I started, there's a lot of innovation going on. Exactly where we are 5 years from now, we don't know. But the technology unleashes new possibilities so that as you go into this, you can try out new and cross new boundaries. And this is again why I said so important for universities to start early and educate the students and see how can you do in your local society when this gets launched, and you all of a sudden can be connected to the internet with considerably better performance. I think in the lower left-hand part, we have one interesting piece of statistics. 2 years after the launch of 5G in South Korea, over half of the data load is on 5G. And that's by only converting a little bit over 20% of the subscriptions to 5G. So very rapidly, the entire usage profile shifts because the service is so more enjoyable. And that, of course, is a business potential for operators and the ones who provide applications on top of the networks. Next slide, please. So what's 5G being used for? And here we can separate between two fields, consumers and enterprise. In a bit, let me talk about enterprise, but we start with consumers now. And as I said, it's really an early period here with early adopters are trying out and they're having a field day. They're trying new applications with more and more demanding video content, more advanced gaming, and it's XR driven. Exactly what will be the long-term trend here, it's too early to say. But you can see here, you have a number of examples to show how much usage that the users actually have once they're using 5G. And I just say the theme is clear, it's more enjoyable, thus they use it more. So it's really a field day for those who want to provide new kinds of application, push boundaries. Next slide, please. Oops, okay. We've had a little bit of PowerPoint issue here, but that's okay. Now, the 5G system, of course, it builds and enhances on the systems we've had before. So it's not a brutal paradigm shift in that sense, but it's considerably more potent. In this slide, I have 3 layers. Let's start from the bottom, the dark blue part. There, I put in the acronyms that we have in the normal networks. And I apologize, there are some PowerPoint formatting things there. We have the radio network, the transport network, the core network, and so on. Those components we have in 4G, 3G, and 2G. But of course, there are newer generations that embraces the latest technology. And those are the components that the operators install in the network. That is also then where out of that a number of values are derived. Of course, coverage and capacity that we have in earlier systems, voice services, but more important, perhaps looking at 5G. If you look on the right-hand side, you have network slicing. What is a slice in this sense? A slice is a way in 5G, it's a new concept that we've introduced, where you can literally cut a slice through the system and ensure a certain delivery of a service just for that slice. So imagine if you have, let's say, a vehicle traveling on the road and it's partially assisted by the network. Then from a real-time point of view, it's of course very time critical that data arrives to that vehicle within the right time instance. Well, in the future then, when it's 5G enabled, the car provider can ensure they get a slice for that service. And that slice will ensure data is at the right place at the right moment. So that's a key enabler compared to today's systems, which do not have this ability. They're more best effort oriented systems to drive new business opportunities. Other dimensions, trusted execution environment, trust, security, resilience, reliability, important things as we progress forward. And the ability to compute closer to the user to use what we so-called edge technology is there. Then let's go to the third layer on top. That's where the new applications comes in. On the right-hand side, you have the enhanced mobile broadband. So again, media intensive. But then we listed a number of cases here which are enterprise oriented. Let it be smart cities, let it be construction, let it be first responder systems, so government driven, agriculture, and so forth. And if you look on these enterprises, they have very varying needs. Again, here's where slicing comes in. A slice will ensure that energy utility company can have the right delivery of information when it's needed in their, I say, factory or they're in operations, regardless if it's a physical factory or if it's a countrywide distribution system of electrical power, as an example. And 5G has ability to deliver these streams of information with the right characteristics depending on the new user segment. And again, tying it back to innovation. Enormous amount of innovation to be done at this top layer, building upon the services and the support from the 5G system. Next slide, please. And that's indeed what we have here. On your left-hand side, you can see a study Ericsson has done with Arthur D. Little. We took 10 different industrial segments and we assessed the value for mobile operators in 2030 if they embrace the enterprise potential beyond the traditional business based on 5G. Then on top of that, you have other ICT providers, but this is only the mobile operator part. And we estimate it to be $700 billion in additional revenue on top of their existing business. You can see a breakdown on different segments here, and certainly for your nation, many of these are relevant and will be even more relevant coming forward. It includes anything from manufacturing industries, but it certainly you have agriculture, you have public transport, financial services, and energy utilities, etc. On the right-hand side is another very interesting study that's made by ABI Research, and they looked at digital factories, smart factories only. And again, coming back to the previous talk, this is a core part of the Industry 4.0. Now, the yellow curve is ABI Research prediction of the number of wired connections in factories. Here you can see it's a moderate growth. The blue curve, exponential, right, in shape, that is the number of wireless connections. And as you can see, it goes from low numbers in today to a whopping 4.7 billion in 2030. It is an enormous uptake of connections here. And just imagine what innovation power is unleashed as the world all of a sudden includes all of these connections into factories. I argue, of course, a very large share of this will be 5G connections. That's still to be seen. This includes all kinds of wireless connectivity. But 5G has a number of merits. It's safe and secure. It has the best provisions for reliability and security, and it certainly has a performance, and it has a slicing support. But be part of this enormous innovation activity that will come over this decade as wireless connections will come into enterprises and into their production flows. Here it's digital factories, it applies for agriculture, it applies for smart cities, etc. Next slide, please. So how do we do that then? Well, Internet of Things, IoT, will be a vital part of that. We in our industry divided into 4 groups: massive IoT, broadband IoT, critical IoT, industrial automation IoT. And 5G embraces all of them. And it includes all kinds of different cases, some with very time-critical communication, like critical IoT, where we, with this extraordinarily short latency or delay, can ensure that information is coming to the right point. Industrial automation that has provisions for time protocols that are used in factories. Broadband IoT with very large peak rates in the gigabits, and also being able to transmit vast amount of data, like for video surveillance. Massive IoT, very, let's say, sparse on communication, very long range, and also then living on one battery charge for years. All of these categories are there, and all of them can be used at the same time. And let's have a look at that on the next slide. And first, on the left-hand side here, you can see 2G, 3G. They support the most elementary massive IoT parts, but really going forward, the evolution is in 4G and in particular in 5G. In one factory, you can have all of these, as I said. Some of it time sensitive, some of it critical for other reasons, some of it being bulk data, if I put it that way. It's a matter of optimizing your network. It's a matter of optimizing cost of the devices, etc. But the 5G standard meets up to all of these different needs. So with that, let's take another example and let's look at some of the potentials we have there. Take the next slide, please. Yeah, so this is a slide from one of Ericsson's factories. In our factories today, we use 5G. We started with 4G, and we use both 4G and 5G today, in fact. This is from our Nanjing factory, and you can see a number of examples here. We use, as an example, we use drones that fly around in a high storage area. They regularly scan the area and they make sure that the drone reads whatever is stored in the shelves. We know exactly where everything is, and we know if it's dynamically being reshuffled or misplaced because the drone scans the area. We have automatic guided vehicles. They traverse by themselves into the factory floor, being guided by 5G. We have surveillance systems. We use AR training. We use AR remote assist. So if a person is to inspect the product with their goggles, they can get guided where to look, and they can even read off things and process it in the network and make sure that everything is okay. 5G is a part of our production facilities. In a factory we have in Louisville, Texas, in the United States, we make 5G gear, and of course we have 5G powered connectivity in the factory. It drives efficiency, it drives safety, and it secures better products, better quality. So let's take the next slide and see how other industries are coming as well. So I think there's an enormous demand now in the world to use 5G. Here are 4 cases. I listed ports, airports, mines, and factories. So let me give you a few examples. And if we take airports, Ericsson is providing a wireless network now to all the 3 city airports in Paris. And it's an enormous undertaking. And when you do this, of course, you take it in steps. You start somewhere, and then over time, you progress more and more. First task is just to get all people connected. 120,000 people need connections. Well, that can be done. We know that, right? But it's the different groups of users. Air traffic controllers has a higher priority than people in other categories, as an example. And then step by step, you add more IoT, and step by step, you can optimize the flow in this kind of factory or installation, the airport. You become what we say data-driven. You get more data points, you get readings of where goods are, where machines are, and you can optimize things. Just imagine to quickly be able to swap which gate an airplane should go to. You can relocate people, you can relocate luggage going to and from the airplane, and you can minimize the time the airplane is on the ground. Being on the ground is not billable time for the airline carriers. So an airport that has the shortest downtime is a good airport, right? Mines, as an example, we use it there. I will come back to that in a few examples. Factories. Ericsson supplies all the 3 leading car manufacturers in Germany now with systems. In fact, in Daimler-Benz factory, their latest factory 56 uses 5G connectivity today. Industries are coming into this. They want to be data-driven, they want to be part of Industry 4.0, and they want to start to innovate and be with high connectivity and not using wires. Let's take the next slide, and I'll show you a few examples on that. So ports, I mentioned. I have a list on the right-hand side, a report, a white paper that you can find on Ericsson.com, where we go through some experience we have from ports. There are a number of economical numbers there, 200,000 euro per hour when you keep a ship at bay, as one example, right? Cost of inaction. Cost of inaction is a key thing. By having high degree of connectivity in your production facility, you can be data-driven, you can optimize your flow. Another way of looking at optimizing the flow, let's look on the top row to the right there. The automatic guided vehicles that then transport the containers on the ground. In one port, we just started to optimize the route dynamically, which we can do then. And we cut their energy need by 10%. Very simple. How could we do that? Well, when everything is connected, we know where everything is, and we can start to process and then apply some smart algorithms, AI, ML based, and you can optimize routes dynamically. And you can do this by maintaining and even improving safety, because you know where people are, you know where machines are, and then you can make sure there are no incidents. So Port of Rotterdam, as an example, they're all using wireless system now, 4G they started with, and going into 5G as one example. Other ports are doing it as well. Next slide, please. That should be mining. Yeah, there are many cases in mining here. Mines, I usually say it's just a factory, but a good factory is because it's concealed. There's so much to do in here. You can optimize machinery, know where everything is. You can increase safety. You can easily put out air sensors. You don't need any wires. You just toss them out a little bit in the mine. The miners know that you more accurately monitor the air quality. They feel safer. You increase productivity and you increase safety, of course. One small example, by being data-driven, by having the connectivity, and by doing it at good cost levels. We are operating, or we are supplying a number of mines now in a number of continents, and I think it's just a fantastic opportunity to optimize production flow. So next slide, please. Now, last thing here on the networks. There's a lot of discussion in the industry whether it should be dedicated networks or it should be countrywide networks, to take two extremes. Now, my view is dedicated, absolutely, in some cases, but it should be logically dedicated, maybe not physically. That depends on the needs of the industry. In this slide, you have some robot machine at the bottom where it's all on premises and it's all very tightly coupled to the production site for integrity reasons, for real-time critical reasons, etc. On the other hand, if you are providing a network to a railway company, it will by per default be countrywide, and you still will need the integrity and reliability in the system. So logically, it can still be a dedicated network. The 5G system provides all these different categories so that operators can address different segments depending on the needs of the enterprise. So let's go to the next slide then, please. And let's look a little bit on how this can be built. We need high-performing, cost-efficient networks. And, of course, they have to be cost-efficient in any territory. So let's take the next slide. And a key thing then is the radio spectrum. So we have the low bands that are traditionally used, 2G, 3G, 4G. We have the low mid bands that are also used, 3G, 4G. We have the new mid bands, a little bit higher, up to 3.5 to 6 gigahertz. And we have the higher bands, 24 to 40 gigahertz. They have different kinds of characteristics. Coverage, capacity, latency, we typically look at. The very high bands, excellent capacity, excellent low latency, but sadly the coverage is less good. The low bands is the opposite. Fantastic coverage, smaller capacity, and longer latency. Now the mid bands, say 3.5 to 6 gigahertz, the new bands for 5G are very popular because they have decent characteristics in all these three categories. So if you're a mobile operator, you can get your hands on new 3.5 gigahertz spectrum, please take it, I would say. Over time, you should also have the higher bands because you will need it in urban areas for capacity and latency reasons over time. But a key thing here is to be able to combine all the layers. And therefore, I have a message also to regulators. It's very important that these frequency bands are neutral, so that when you neutral to technology, so that operators can reform traffic and start to use the higher G when they have a market need for it. So let's take the next slide. And here I tried to exemplify then with the three different layers, the high band, the mid bands, and the low bands. The low band reaches further out, the mid band reaches far out, and the higher bands have less of coverage. But when you are in an area where you see several different bands, you should be able to aggregate them and reap the best out of their different characteristics, so to say. That's already done in 4G today, and it will be used even more in 5G. Next one, please. So a little bit about the technology, and now we have a wide audience, so we shouldn't go too deep on it. But this is radio technology then, and I guess I apologize for the formatting here, but that's okay. You can see here on the high bands in the table, the relative capacity and the complexity of the technology is significantly higher, right? That's the latest technology, and by chipping in lots of our R&D money over a number of years, we're able to get this out now on a larger scale. What's the upside? You can see with this massive MIMO beamforming ability, we can reach further out. So we have larger coverage. That is to say, you can have better performance in a larger area. And then you need fewer sites potentially. And you can also direct different beams in different direction and get less interference from others, and you can increase capacity. If I put this more in layman terms, I would say the production cost goes down. Fewer hardware boxes, less equipment in the radio mast, and less cost per gigabyte delivered. So next, please. Another key thing is when you introduce 5G, of course, operators are concerned to manage their investment wisely. And then a key thing then is a technique called dynamic spectrum sharing. It was introduced by Ericsson. And what we allow for is that instantaneously in a radio unit, the system can decide whether it talks to a 4G user or a 5G user. So in 1 millisecond, it can address a 4G user, next millisecond, a 5G user. So therefore, you don't need to have separate frequency bands for 4G and 5G. And that dramatically reduces the entry cost, and it dramatically increases the speed by which you get large coverage for your new services. Regulatory-wise, you have to have the permission to use the spectrum for both 4G and 5G. So again, if your local regulation is prohibitive, it will delay you. And again, I can only encourage regulators to be embracive of the new technology potential here. And is this happening in the world? Yeah, let's take a look at the next slide then. And we can see one case, we supply Swisscom in Switzerland then. They have then, if you see in this map, the purple one there is where they have 5G on the new bands, 3.5 gigahertz. The green areas is where they have 5G on the existing bands, the bands they already deployed for 4G. So the purple areas, they cover 50% of the population. But in 96% of the population, they have 1 gigabit per second by using 5G on an existing band. So pretty much everywhere where you go in Switzerland today, you can get 1 gigabit per second for 96% of the population. It's a fantastic way of quickly getting speed or coverage in your 5G service. And I think this is a great opportunity when countries in Africa are ready to go into 5G, excel from your existing base, and you can much quicker get coverage. Next example, if you take one slide. This is another example, maybe it's a bit detailed, but we of course try to make sure to have radio gear that is very cost efficient where you need to deploy the equipment. In one example here, we very typically when you deploy a site, you have 6 radio units to cover 2 frequency bands and 3 sectors as we talk about. Now, in a new solution that we have here, you can cover it all with only 1 radio unit. And that of course drastically reduces the investment an operator has to do. It also reduces the impact on the radio site. You have less hardware in the mast, and you can spend less money on the foundation of the mast, etc. And it has really impressive statistics, very high output power that is needed for good coverage. It also has good reception performance through special techniques. So this is just as an example to say that where dedicated equipment is needed to deploy 5G, one can in rural areas choose these extraordinarily good cost-optimized solutions that have the correct amount of capacity and coverage for a rural site without overspending on hardware. Okay, next one, please. And another thing, which is a thing to very much keep in mind, is what we call at Ericsson build with precision. And quite often when we look at operators' networks, they choose a certain few different kinds of configurations and they deploy it throughout. But when you look more granular at networks, you have certain sites that have very large load, some that have medium, some have low. Now, 7% of the sites in a typical network, they manage 1/4 of the load. 23% of the sites, they manage half of the load. And 70% of the sites manage only 1/4 of the load. So it's a very uneven distribution. Now, if you look at, let's say, the last tail there, 70% of the sites manage 1/4 of the load. Now, it turns out all of these are not only in the rural areas. Some are in city areas. So we argue you can, by carefully looking at the need for coverage and capacity throughout your network, you can optimize your investment. And that optimization drives to make sure that you have the performance you want to deliver, while at the same time then not overspending on hardware and not overspending on your coming energy bill. Because having the right kind of equipment, you can optimize the energy consumption once you process data. So by carefully planning how you build your network, you can tailor it to deliver perfect performance for the traffic need that you need to have. But you need to consider where you have the traffic. And does that have an impact? Yeah, let's have a look at the next slide, please. So we talk here about breaking the energy curve. We argue that 5G will consume less energy than 4G. Not only less energy per bit, but also in absolute terms. And you have some statistics here. We say that we should have an absolute energy savings by 35% in our portfolio by 2022. That's compared to our portfolio in 2016, and we are ahead of that already, I would say. So it is possible to deploy 5G with the latest technology and also to be 5G efficient. Then let's go to the, I think, the summary, if I remember. No, we have one more, sorry. And then just a proof point here of the energy part. I think a week or two ago, there was a press release out that Vodafone in the UK is deploying the latest 5G gear, and they get really good energy savings. You can see here in this setup, 43% less energy with a 5G network, and the weight of the equipment 50% less. So therefore, less constraints on the site build as well. So then please, let's go to the next slide. Okay, and that's the penultimate slide. So just to give you a view here, 5G, I started saying, drives innovation. It really is so, right? It drives innovation for consumers, it drives it for enterprises. We started early looking at the enterprise potential. We used haptic feedback. You can see a person here maneuvering a big front loader. The front loader is in a mine, but the person is sitting above ground. That's in commercial production. We use already XR in our own production facilities. Here, a pad is directing the technician where to do fault finding. No more time looking up manuals. It's online guiding the person where to measure. Time to fault resolution considerably shorter. We're working already with improving the AR VR experience by so-called split rendering, where since 5G is so capable, we can put part of the compute power in the network and with the high capacity interface, transmit a picture over to the goggles where some rendering is being done, reducing the need for compute power in the goggles, and thus reducing the cost of the consumer device. Our research team is already looking at the future, and we call it Internet of the Senses. We're looking at what if you can use all of your senses in the future, a decade from now. So maybe you can feel texture, maybe you can feel smell. Just imagine what that will do when you do e-shopping 10 years from now. Can we solve it? We don't know, but we're looking at it. That's a message. So as industry adopts haptic feedback, we're adapting XR in production, and we're going all the way into Internet of the Senses for the future. So let's do the summary, please. Yeah, so there's a very strong shift towards 4G and 5G in the industry. I'd say it's clear. If you have the possibility, you go for 5G. If you don't have it, start with 4G. Many of the enterprise installations today are on 4G. They will eventually upgrade to 5G, but 4G can deliver a lot. A very fast uptake of 5G, number of devices there, device cost is going down. And it will unleash a lot of potential in society. Do embrace it, make sure that you are coming out early and that you take advantage when society becomes wireless, and really drive that innovation power, becoming data-driven and using that data to refine the way you steer and operate things. A lot more values to be unleashed there, and I think a tremendous opportunity in Africa in many, many fields. And it's over this decade that power will be unleashed. So please embrace it. I can very much encourage you to do so. It will be great. I dare promise. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Magnus, for your very interesting presentation. And I believe that you touched on a lot of very important things. So, for example, you mentioned the importance of having cost-efficient networks that will be deployed. We had a keynote yesterday as well by Professor Fetwas, who's the Vodafone chair at TU Dresden, and he spoke about the campus networks that they are deploying in Germany. So my question is, how can Ericsson and in general the wider industry facilitating the democratization of deploying 5G networks such that it is really not only in the hands of the mobile network operators, but in industries, in research and development? There are some barriers, obviously, that come from regulators and etc. But from the industry's perspective, what can be done, or what more can be done, in your opinion?
Well, it's okay. It's an interesting question, right? Because it's one constraining factor we have is frequency spectrum. That's given by God, and we can't produce more. I would love to, but we can't. So I think if you're a regulator, you need to make sure how a nation uses that spectrum in the best way. And here's a little bit of things that you need to trade them. If you let anyone use it, then you get a very large chunk of fragmentation, and that's not very efficient. Perhaps if you let only one use it, maybe you don't get enough innovation power. What we've seen in the world so far is that in many nations, they typically divide it into, let's say, 2 to 4 different operators, and that drives competition between them, and then you get better coverage and usage of that spectrum. That is, I think, going forward, clearly a model. Now, is that the only model, or can it be complemented? No, of course it can, and here there are judgments. One thing that's being used now in some countries is to, in different terms, allow for what's called industrial spectrum, where a smaller chunk of spectrum is set aside so that an industry can use it. That can be an option. But it's also here, it's not, there are no clear-cut answers, right? It's judgments you have to make. That local industry, there's some cases where that will be very beneficial. But it's also so, even if you have this local industry, I'm quite sure that when somebody comes in there, they want to use their phone, as servicemen, as an example. And I can give an example. In our factory in Texas, we have drones zooming around the building and guiding lorries coming in, incoming goods. Now, they need to be connected to the operator's network outside. So you will have these interoperability issues, and so therefore where I'm coming to, quite often you want to have them interconnected one way or the other. So my advice there to any regulator is to look at the entire nation. You have to have a very straightforward way there for allowing for a huge investment to build national networks. The different ways to do that and different ways that spectrum is allocated through auctions or through beauty contests with different kinds of incentives. I think the industry dimension can be there with industrial spectrum, but also think through how you make sure that they can be interconnected with operator spectrum. Because overall, the big benefit here is to have national coverage. I mentioned the Port of Rotterdam. They used to have a Wi-Fi network and it didn't fly. It was too big of a size. They wanted to have a more reliable system. And then 4G was there. So there are many considerations.
All right, thank you. And we have a question from one of our attendees. He asks Dr. Mercuria, how can Ericsson help develop or the development of local 5G innovative services by supporting end-to-end regional test beds?
Yeah, it's excellent. So here again, bottom of my heart, I think please start as early as possible, and then I mean, it is possible now to first of all just start without having a system, but knowing the characteristics of it and building applications on top of it. That will carry anyone who does that far away. Then of course, can I, if, let's say I'm a university professor, can I have a system at my university? Well, everything is possible, right? But then of course the university has to talk with some counterpart that can have such a system. But I think that's an excellent way to spawn innovation power by doing that. And there have been many initiatives over the world where different parties have come to such setups, short-term or long-term, right? And I think please do it, I'd say, as a spokesperson for the industry, if I may, because I think it's good for all parties. And it's also important here that, of course, there will be some players that will provide global solutions. That's always the case, right? But there's always a lot of opportunity for local innovations here. So I think in any part of the world to do this is great. And as in anything, the early mover advantage is there. So the earlier anyone can be in that cycle, the better, because you mature earlier. So universities move, I would say. It's excellent.
Okay. Another question that I would like to ask is, sometimes some of the detractors of deployment of next generation networks like 5G and 6G will cite the reason that in developing countries, like many countries in Africa, the coverage of even previous generations of technologies is not fully deployed. And as an example, in South Africa, where 5G has been deployed, it usually is deployed in more affluent areas as opposed to reaching the last mile and the maybe rural and non-urban communities. So what would you say to those who say first, before focusing on 5G, let's rather digitize and connect everybody who does not have that connectivity?
So of course, there are economic realities in this, right? You can't light the system up everywhere from the beginning. So you take it in steps. And then you take your first step where you think you have a good way to succeed with that first step, to get some return over that and so forth. So that's quite natural. That will happen. So, but given that, how can one ensure that that process goes as fast as possible? I think one of the examples that I talked about here, where you can software upgrade yourself to 5G. I mean, if you bought a radio unit from Ericsson from 2015 and onwards, so 6 years back, you can software upgrade it to 5G, as I showed then with the Swisscom example. So that's one way where we've carefully thought, how can we much quicker get to this first coverage? So I think that's something that in any society can encourage to see how far would that carry there. Then another thing that goes in hand is also, of course, what's the cost of devices? And again, as I said, it's very encouraging to see that the price drops a lot quicker. But of course, until we get ultra low cost devices, it will still take some time. That evolution continues. But I think the industry we're part of has a fundamental momentum there that's unprecedented. Last year, 1.4 billion smartphones were sold in the world, all technologies, and it's just a phenomenal amount of equipment, of high-tech things, right? I can't find of any other industry that has such a scale. That scale helps to push down the cost of the devices. So yes, it does take some time, but it goes faster, and the scale will help to push that out for everyone. So it will come.
Okay, and we have one last question again from the audience. And he says, thanks for the 5G industrial applications presentation. What is Ericsson and mobile industry's contribution towards the UN Decade of Biodiversity Ecosystem Restoration? Yeah, that's a question.
So here I must confess, I'm personally not read up on it, right? But I can say we work very closely with the UN and many of the initiatives there. I will have to check up and come back to exactly for that one.
Okay, thank you. So I believe there are no other questions. Is there any closing remarks from you?
I'm very delighted to be here, and I think 5G has a lot of potential. I think it will have a lot of potential in Africa. Become digitalized. It's part of the Industrial Revolution.
Oh, sorry, just another question popped up if you have time. Yes, sure. So this is from Emmanuel Megabo. A great presentation. His question is, from the vendor point of view, what would justify the slow pace of rolling off of licensed IoT technologies, such as narrowband IoT, Cat M1, and others versus the unlicensed technologies on the continent of Africa?
So exactly in Africa, I don't know there, but I'm sure it comes down to coverage for the services and also to build the market to get momentum. But if I come back to our mobility report, as I mentioned, 5.5 billion cellular IoT devices we predict in 2025, 90% of them are 4G, 5G. So and the CAGR there is something like 23% per year, top of my head. So I think it's coming along very, very well.
Yeah, I think the question was more on the use of the unlicensed technologies versus the 5G and
yeah, well, But I'm promoting the licensed technologies. No, but that's a very different business model, right? And I think in the beauty with the licensed technologies is that you have very wide area coverage, and I think if you look here on the enterprise potential, when your product can move around in a society and you can add on services wherever the product is, will have lots of merit going forward. And then unlicensed technologies will not have that.
Yes, and I think also the issue maybe of quality of service becomes important when some of the applications are a little bit more mission critical and rely on stringent network capabilities.
Exactly.
Okay, so Magnus, Ewerbring, thank you so much for your keynote presentation.
Pleasure, thank you.
Very interesting. All right. So our final keynote presenter is Professor James Maina. So James Maina grew up in Tanzania, and he is currently a full-time professor of civil engineering at the University of Pretoria in South Africa, and an adjunct professor at the Chang'an University in Xi'an, China, as well as Shodong Zhuai University in Shandong, China. So Professor Maina is registered with the Engineering Council of South Africa as a professional engineer and a fellow member of the South African Institute of Civil Engineering, SACSI, as well as the South African Academy of Sciences. Professor Maina is an expert in numerous fields of science, technology, and engineering, but is more focused on the pavement engineering, including numerical modeling, characterization of mechanical properties of materials, technology of contact stresses between tires and road surfaces, and non-destructive field testing and the use of high-performance computing. Professor Maina is the architect of a suite of software packages that are widely used by road and airport industries. So with a lot to boost behind his background, I'd like to welcome Prof. Maina to give his keynote presentation at AFRICON. Prof, we can see your screen, but we cannot hear or see you.
Okay, good. I think we're almost getting to good afternoon there in the East African region, and good morning to everybody else that is listening and watching. First of all, I would like to recognize and acknowledge the contribution of some of my colleagues in putting up this presentation today. And specifically, I would like to mention the Chief Operating Officer of Gautrain Management Agency, Mr. Shepo Hobe, and my colleague at the Department of Civil Engineering at the University of Pretoria, Professor Van Stein. And also thanks to the organizing committee of IEEE AFRICON 2021 for inviting me to come and talk to you. So the topic of my presentation today is on initiatives and empowerment of Africa for intelligent transport systems. So as a civil engineer, I'm going to talk to you about transport and highlight opportunities for multidisciplinary collaboration, because I think fields within IEEE have got a lot to contribute to making transportation a seamless and enjoyable experience for everybody. So what I'd like to suggest here is to harness the extraordinary innovation taking place through multidisciplinary collaboration to make far more efficient use of the existing transportation systems. And I'll explain why and how. So the outline of my presentation is, I'll start with the smart city, looking at transport planning, and then I'll go through each of the next items up to item number 6. So starting with smart city and smart transport planning, I'd like us to just think about the current status quo, where we have a huge population growth, including number of workers, and I'll say why number of workers, because the way most of our cities have been designed and planned make it necessary for people to travel in the morning, going to their workplaces and go back home during the evening. Is that an efficient plan for cities? People have started saying they don't think so. There's huge economic growth, meaning that more goods need to be transported in our transport infrastructure network. And are they efficient? And the land use patterns, as I mentioned, that where people live is not necessarily where they work, is not necessarily where the children go to school to. So the land use pattern is also something that there are cities that are able to start looking into. There are those who probably will require a little bit of time to address these issues, where people live, where people work, and where people socialize. And all of this will enable us to predict and to look at the future status quo. So I think we all agree that the world is becoming increasingly urban, and numbers tell us so. If you look at from 2010 to 2050, there's an increase, annual increase of about 1.4% of population in the urban centers, while there's a decrease of about 0.2% of population per annum from 2010 to 2050 from rural area. What does this mean in terms of some of those who deal with transportation? The urban passenger mobility demand is exploding. Between 2010 and 2030, there has been an increase of 68% in urban passenger mobility demand. And this is in trillions of person kilometer per annum. Now, between 2010 and 2050, there's an estimate that the passenger mobility demand will increase by 2.6 times. This is 260%. Now, how are we going to meet all these demands? Are we going to meet them through more construction of road and railway, airports, or making use of technologies? And this is where members of IEEE have got a significant role to play. Looking at the goods, it is even much, much higher. the urban goods mobility demand is estimated to increase threefolds from 2010 to 2050. And this is where my suggestion is we need to have multidisciplinary collaboration to make use of all these technological innovation and come and improve what is happening in the transport area. If you look at where, in the province where I live currently in South Africa, the province of Gauteng, the population is estimated to increase from 3.9 million from 2014 numbers to 8.6 million to 2037. And this translates also into the increase of private cars ownership from 300 cars per million, per 1,000 population to 450 cars per 1,000 population, that is from 2014 to 2037. This is a significant car growth. And it is not only happening in South Africa. The same trend is happening in EU, also in the US cities. They cause a lot of congestion. Something needs to be done about this. This is another graph of showing what happens, and this is the share of public versus private transport ownership. In places like Tokyo, Hong Kong, the share of public transport is much, much higher compared to private transport ownership. Where we are, and I'm sorry, I'm just using an example of the place where I live, at least, and the information that is available. We're not faring very well. Something needs to be done. There are people who have looked at different factors. I think there are about 27 different factors that define the urban mobility index. And they range from below average, through average to above average. Places like Hong Kong, with a higher share of public transport, the mobility index is way above average. The majority of African cities, we are still struggling under below average. Now, this has got implication on productivity of workers, growth of the economy, etc. And this is a motivation for why we need to make use and grab all these technological advancements, instead of saying only that we need to just build more roads, more railway networks. We need to make them more efficient, and then where necessary, we need to build more. This is just a slide to show opportunity for improved networked mobility, looking at innovative thinking, seamless integration, high convenience, and sharing concepts. For cities with mature, with high share of public transport, cities with, and these are mature cities with high share of individual transport, and emerging cities that is partly with partly underdeveloped mobility systems. And the suggestion here is learn from others, see where others made mistakes, improve and leapfrog instead of replicating what others have done. So that is setting up the scene for why we need to take advantage of all the technological developments. Now, smart transport and data management. It was also mentioned with all these industrial revolutions, from the first industrial revolutions in the 1784, thereabout, with mechanization, and then mass production, then automation. Now we're in the fourth industrial revolution with a lot of digitization, which is characterized by emerging technology breakthrough. And it is expected to result in the fusion of physical, digital, and biological worlds. Now, with the digitization, we see the rise of smart cities, because now people start looking at all the possibilities. What was not possible in the past is now possible. The alternative energy sources, the recycling, all these issues around the environmental aspects, taking care of our environment. These have become possible with more information available. IT-enabled cities, green buildings, electricity grid, renewable energy, electricity meters and management, smart connected parking, learning and skills development centers, and things like this. With the current pandemic, things are also even changing even much more faster. We are all sitting at different places, maybe different cities in the world, while attending this AFRICON 2021. Now, if we did not have all these technological developments, it would have been very, very difficult to meet. So a smart city is a municipality that uses information and communication technologies. And this is where IEEE colleagues need to play even a much more significant role in making sure that cities, especially emerging cities in African countries, are capacitated enough to be able to use information and communication technologies and infrastructure to improve the quality of public services and thereby citizen welfare. I need to move a little bit fast. Now, the global trend in the transportation area, we see the so-called mobility as a service. And this is where companies like Uber, Lyft, etc., have really helped in moving this concept forward. The mobility as a service. And the idea here is to move away from privately owned modes of transport and moving towards consuming transport as a service, with an expectation that this will reduce road traffic congestion, because you will have reduced or reduction or decrease in private vehicle ownership. Increase the use of public transport as travelers combine and use diverse modes of transport. But for this also to happen, we need a reorganization of public transport market, the implementation of public transport authority, which enhances the streamlines public transport. We need improved oversight of public transport from administrative and operational perspective. And these are technology-driven trends. And we need to embrace them and move with them. And where possible, improve the oversight so that the traveling public will have very good experience while traveling. This is just a repeat with the digitization and all the virtual reality, the use of the artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, Internet of Things, big data. All of these will help in improving the the experience of the traveling public, as well as the freight and logistics. And hopefully we will all reach a point where we will look at mobility, transport just as a service and get into collaborative consumption of transport where there will not be any need to own a private vehicle. But this will only happen through these collaborative efforts. Strong public transport authorities guiding the direction where everybody will benefit, coupled with the private sector that does all these technological advancements and developments. Now, the reality also tells us, for example, if you look at the experience in South Africa, the Generation Y, the millennials, there are about 14.5 million millennials at the moment in South Africa. And the numbers will be more or less similar in most of the even emerging countries, developing countries. 93% of them have got smartphones. And now, imagine this. This was before the pandemic. 70% shopped online. So these are the citizens of the future driving the city of the future and smart cities. 48% of these millennials, the Generation Y, they are open to switching companies if better services or product are offered. They're not going to stick to just one brand, as long as, and we'll see next slide, as long as their needs, their requirements, their demands are met, they will move. And these millennials, and these are the ones who are now will be driving the growth of the economies around the world, around the African continent. 91% of affluent millennials will use social network. They will rely on social media for product information, greater affinity towards technology brands. Millennials are eager to try new challenges, and they are more likely to engage when the product service provides an experience. So these are the citizens of the future with very high technology adoption, very sensitive to time and cost savings, increased demand for variety. They view vehicles as commodities. Those with young children or those who are young in the audience, if you ask them whether they want to own a car, they'll say, why? It's a bother. If I can have a service that will help me move from point A to point B whenever and wherever I want to move, I don't need to own a private vehicle. So they move vehicles as just commodity. They've got increased access to information and they demand convenience. So transporters of the future need to take note of that. provide multimodal means of transport, integrated fare structure that is data-driven, capital-light activities, consolidated market, dynamic scheduling, personalized and value-adding. This is for any transport of the future. Well, if they want to be successful, they have to consider who are the citizens of the future. And the citizens of the future are the millennials. And the Generation Z, they're coming up slowly. Now, for all of these to happen, we need to be moving from our old ways of how data was being consumed, descriptive analysis, diagnostic analysis, towards predictive analytics, prescriptive analytics, where you start looking at forecasting. What will happen? What should we do? Recommending the best action. Because this is how dynamic the world has become. And the transport industry is trying to move at that speed. And to move at that speed, we need to not only look at data to explain why that happened, we need to look at data through the artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the use of high-performance computing to start looking at forecasting and recommending the best actions. Optimizing transport. And this is just for a seamless experience, multimodal ticketing, mobile ticketing, car park management, road tolling. There have been a lot of resistance, especially for open tolling in South Africa. But open tolling allows for free flow of traffic, congestion reduction, traffic priority, fleet management, train and buses, and quality of services to optimize the transport resources. And always have smart mobility analytics for dynamic dashboards. Through this, then, the shift is towards an integrated transport management system, where you will have different operators providing a transit service to users who have access to multiple transport modes within the integrated fare or finance management system ecosystem. But for that to work well, you need to have, well, a good cloud service. You need to have a good journey planner, good API, automatic fare collection network, and then a control center that serves as a decentralized nerve center where data is stored, enriched, analyzed, and distributed. And this is an area where the IEEE colleagues have a role to play. And I'm sure some of you already are playing a role, but for the African continent, we need to be doing more. I know there are challenges with coverage, etc., but that should not deter us from aiming for the moon. There are still challenges with data interoperabilities for different, for example, car manufacturers. They've got different sensors. Do they talk to each other? They need to have vehicle-to-vehicle communication, vehicle-to-infrastructure communication, vehicle-to everything. V2X. And then as people become consumers of the information and data, you need to have a system that filters and deliver exactly the right data to each application. Quality of service parameters to prioritize network traffic and manage bandwidth. I'm sure you are all, most of you will be experts in this. Serverless design and reliable delivery. I need to move a bit faster. And through this then, and as all of this, the intelligent transport becomes data-centric. We need to just make sure that there is proper integration, good event processing, big data analytics, and partnership. So that the traveling, the mobility becomes an experience that one enjoys. I'll skip some of these. The extent of data requirements. We have, depending on the layers, and we need to have to collect a lot of data for both operational, transactional, as well as physical. And the necessary information will be filtered through to the user. But at the same time, we need to take care of our infrastructure. We need in real time, need to know what is happening. Most of the mobile systems now, even the car telematics, you have all this, most of the information, where there's an accident occurring somewhere, you get information, you can change your route. All these are efforts to make sure that the traveling public have a seamless experience. Just allow me to take a quick sip here. Connected drivers. When someone plans to move from point A to point B, everything that is happening along the way can be at the palm of their hand, at the dashboard of their cars. We need the same experience, a similar experience in most of the African countries. And this can be driven by people sitting in this audience. So the future state of transport, which is data-centric, will be massively networked, integrated, public and private collaboration, dynamically priced, and user-centered. This is what we need to achieve. There are cities, even in the African continent, that have started doing exactly that. I know Gauteng, the province where I live, they are busy even establishing the Smart Mobility Center to just make sure that all the right technologies will be deployed to meet these requirements for the province to be the future state, to meet the future state of transport. Integrated fare management, the use of apps, one ticket. This is something that is happening around the world, and this also needs to be happening in the African continent and African cities. where you have your journey planner, you've got your transport management center, integrated ticketing system, and then the API. The journey planner application, it provides your timetable, map information, public transport fares, notifications. It offers intermodal integration. Benefits of journey planning, they include tailored information, reduce the traffic congestion, encourage use of alternative public modes of transport, reduce the parking needs. And the key application features will be the interactive and integrated trip planner, wide area coverage, includes trains, buses, meter taxis, bicycles, walking, public transport schedules and fares, and GPS using my location. So the idea here is to really move from monomodal to a multimodal ways of means of transport. I think these are all repetition, and in the interest of, I'm not sure, I think time is not that much on my side, probably. If you can guide me, the host.
You have about 10 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. So then we have the integrated fare management, where we have improved the demand and transport management through multimodal ticketing, mobile ticketing, car park management, park and ride, optimize transport resources, improve the planning and monitoring through the smart mobility and analytics, where the use of artificial intelligence, machine learning will help us in the predictive and not that also guide us on what actions we need to take. In the end, improve the user experience through seamless travel experience, easy payment for mobility, common transport product and e-purse, shared media issuance cost. And these are all already, they are standardized through ISO 24014, where each stakeholder has a role which is clearly defined in ISO 24014. Practical application when it comes to maintenance management. Now, you can have the very best system, but if you do not look after it, in the end, you will have problems. So the big question is with the predictive maintenance. Remember, with the data analytics, we don't want to see what we do want to see what happened, but we want to see what will also happen. And if you can improve or you can have a smarter replacement and inspection, improve fuel cost efficiency, decrease planned and unplanned maintenance, reduce required compliance, etc., you will have improved the customer satisfaction. You will reduce failure and maximize performance of the system. You will optimize asset availability. You will lower risk exposure will decrease loss of service. So this is just an example. This is the Gautrain. It's a railway system that runs between Pretoria and Johannesburg and towards the OR Tambo International Airport. They've got, for example, just as an example, an automatic vehicle inspection system that inspects the railway vehicle, keep records of what is happening, compare what happened the last time it was inspected and now, and start predicting what will happen and see how you can start smartly do the maintenance, which will in the end improve the reliability of the system. So these are some of the components that are being monitored: wheel profile monitoring, brake pad monitoring, brake disc, etc. And then in the last, the data management. So this enables them to provide a reliable system, because you cannot have a failure that you did not anticipate. Because the moment you have a failure that you did not anticipate, that will disrupt everything. And because of that, if you look at the train service availability for 2016-2017, this horizontal line here is the norm. But look at how well they've been performing. They've been performing way above the norm. Train service punctuality. This is the norm. They've consistently been performing above the norm. When it comes to roads, and this is the field that I've been working in for a while, you need to understand your materials. You need to understand materials from the laboratory testing and when they're used on site, and capture and store enough record, create a good database of typical data, database of suite of test data when the materials are used on site, long-term performance, and then numerical modeling. Through that, we aim to create what we call the digital twin. So we have your real pavement structure and digitized information of that pavement structure. And this helps us to integrate digital with real life pavement performance. And then I'll show a quick simulation of how we intend to use this. And so with the digitization of all this information, we've been tracking and keeping record of, for example, temperature, ambient temperature, pavement temperature, moisture, variation over time, etc., and how these affect the responses of the materials when they are under the loading of trucks, for example. We keep monitoring the type of vehicles that travel over our road networks. So in the end, with all this, and with the few minutes that I have remaining, the vision is to have now to change from looking at transport as a way of just transporting people from point A to point B, but to make it part and parcel of economic development, and that is the transit-oriented development, which is a project that mixes the high-density residential and commercial opportunities with the objective of optimizing the use of land, maximizing the access to public transport. And the benefit of TOD that is transport-oriented development, includes better mobility, reduced car traffic, reduced household spending on transportation, healthier lifestyles, lower pollution, etc. So there's huge benefit in changing how our cities have been planned and designed. And one of the organizations that is running this is the How Train. So what do? They're changing slowly all their stations to become the transit-oriented, the part of the transit-oriented development. So a station not only for people to go on trains and come down, but to have economic activities, to have even residential housing, to have even close by any social services, clinics, hospitals, etc., shopping malls. And this slowly will start changing how people look at transportation. These are just examples. And on the roadsides, with the digital twins, we want to look at the interaction between the trucks on the road surface and how the material respond given the environment. And so in the end, and this is requires the use of high performance computing, where you look at how the trucks, and depending on the loading, etc., what happens to the road on which these trucks are traveling. And after how many repetitions of these loadings is one going to start seeing problems? Problems in terms of rutting, those ditches, those permanent deformations that we see on roads, or cracks, etc., etc. And this brings me to the end of the presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Maina, for a very interesting presentation, which I think provides a good outlook for the possibilities of smart cities. So in the next session, I will invite any questions from either the panelists that are still on the call or from the attendees that have been listening and viewing your presentation. So just to kick things off, I have my own questions. So I've been aware of the idea of smart cities, and I've always been very interested in the possibilities and the opportunities of the development, implementation, and launching of smart cities in Africa. But at the same time, I've come across the concept of smart villages and smart communities. Can you talk to the notion of whether there is any synergies between these two concepts and how smart cities could also, let's say, contribute to the development of smart villages and smart communities, as may be also quite important to think about in the African context?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's an interesting question. I think that the difference is on the scale. So if you just look at smart cities, would be just you're looking at much bigger scale compared to smart communities, smart villages, etc. But in essence, they all rely on the use of information technology and communication to drive, and data, because that's where all things start and end, so that most of the decisions are well informed by the information that is available. Now, the challenge in most of our cities, our villages, is the lack of data. So because of the lack of data, then you start seeing people tending to extrapolate information from more or less similar type setting, population of cities, villages, environment, and say, okay, maybe where they have the information, and then try to extrapolate to other cities and villages where there is lack of information. So I think we need to be more proactive in collecting as much information as possible. Information may not be very good information, but that is how we will learn. If you do not measure, if you do not know what you have, you won't know how to improve it. And the whole concept of smart cities, smart mobility, is to improve the quality of life, to improve the quality of services that people get, etc.
Thank you for that interesting response. And you touched on data being very important, and I think this talks to what you mentioned in your presentation about predictive analytics and prescriptive analytics, I guess. Can you elaborate on how that data can be collected? What are the mechanisms in place? Because it's not quite clear how, because data is available for sure, one just needs to monitor it, but how can you collect it, collate it, and make it useful for some of these applications that you have mentioned?
Yes, so if you look at what people have done, and I think there have been projects in the city of Cape Town, also in Mozambique as well. A lot of people have got mobile phones. So there have been efforts to get people to install some of the apps that will collect information on their movement without compromising their privacy. So I think that is where the key is. So as long as you guarantee that privacy will be protected, then at least you, instead of tracking movement of actual people, you'll be tracking movement of devices. You'll be tracking movement of vehicles. So if you have a control center that collects all this information in real time, you will see what is happening. You will see where there are bottlenecks. You will see where there are challenges. And you can start taking actions to alleviate whatever bottlenecks that will be in your network, in your system, etc., or advise other people, for example, not to go to where there has been an accident. So the CCTV cameras, etc., all of these are a set of sensors that collect information with an objective of improving the service, not compromising the privacy.
I think, yes, thank you. The issue of privacy is, it comes up a lot when people discuss the collection of data. So, and once again, I want to invite any of the keynote speakers, if they would like to join in the discussion, that they may do so. I have another question here from one of the participants, Fiseha Makuria. He asks, I'm very excited about the millennials regarding transportation as a commodity and mobility as a service with no need for a private car. When can we expect this becoming a reality?
Yes, that's a very interesting question, and thank you for that. It is slowly happening. If you look back maybe 3-4 years now, most people where there's good service of these, the Uber, the Lyft, etc. And there has been also a sensor around that, questionnaires, collection of information. You find that people have started deciding, for those who were fortunate enough to have 2 cars, they've opted to sell one and they keep one. So they keep only one just in case they really need to travel and they cannot wait. Otherwise, they use Uber. So Uber or Lyft or all the other companies that provide the transportation service. And the objective there is to just take away the stress of, I have to take my car for maintenance. I have to go fill up the gas tank. I have to do this. You only need to say, I want to move from point A to point B. I want to leave at this time and arrive at a certain time. And somebody will come, pick you up from where you are, drop you off from where you want to go. And that now becomes a service. Now, and slowly now with autonomous vehicles, we expect that to even change significantly, because now with Ubers, you need to have a driver. The driver will have to go and park somewhere. Now with autonomous vehicles, with driverless vehicles, things may be even much, much more different. So slowly things are happening. But we think there'll be even much better. There are a lot of things that are still going to happen.
Okay. And for some of the applications that you emphasized in your presentation, besides the technology that would facilitate in this, so like the building of the platforms that can collate the information and distribute it to the different sectors in a city or the different industries, it seems that equally important, if not more important, would be the buy-in from the public sector, from the governments, from the general population as a whole. So how can you talk to that in encouraging for buy-in, not just from the technology development part of facilitating smart cities, but from other key stakeholders?
Yes, so I think the challenge is not probably on the buy-in as such, but leadership. And buy-in because there is a demand already for convenience, because all of these bring convenience. So as long as there is that need, there's that demand for convenience, then any service that will come in and take advantage of that gap that is in the system will be easily adopted. Like, for example, Uber, it was an opportunity for convenience of traveling, of the traveling public, that the private sector saw and they jumped on it and they took advantage of that. Now you need government, public institutions to provide stronger leadership to guide the direction where things need to go. And that, I think, will bring in a better balance, which is probably lacking at the moment, that balance, because I'm a supporter of the private sector, but private sector also need to be told where opportunities will be so that they can also plan, not for them to search for where the opportunities are. They can search, but also if they are guided where the opportunities are, it makes it easier for them to plan, prepare well, and really drive the development forward. So I'm not too concerned about the buy-in because the need is there. I'm more concerned about the leadership in guiding to the direction where things need to go.
Okay, thank you for answering those questions. I don't know if there are any other questions from the remaining panelists. Dr. Mfupe.
Thank you, Program Director, and thank you, Professor Maina. I'm just thinking loud here. So while we are talking about the smart cities, intelligent transport systems, there's some other schools of thought of those who think maybe they need to live in the quietness somewhere far from all the troubles of the cities, you know. So what do you think would be the balance of the two schools of thoughts? The ones who want to live in smart cities, where you have all of these new technologies, new generations of wireless and IoT systems, and those who like to live very far away from the hassles and bustles of these smart cities. Thank you.
No, thank you. It's an interesting question and perspective. I think most of the people are concerned because they look at the cities in their current form, because they've not experienced and seen how the smart city will be like and how they will operate and how they will come. Just imagine that you live very close to where you work, where your children or grandchildren, etc., go to school to, where you can do your shopping, where there is a park, where there's a place where you can go and relax, etc. And the air is good because there are not a lot of private vehicles driving by, but mostly public transport that will be transporting people in large numbers, like trains, for example. So if you can look at that, so the environment that the smart cities want to create and the experience that people will have will be even much better than you live far away from where all these challenges of the day are, because you'll need to travel from that far place to go to your place of work. So the idea of the smart cities is to take away all those stresses and bring in calmness and bring in very good experience, livable experience, that people will be even much healthier, will be happy, will be, so all the stresses that people imagine will be taken away. That is the imagination that of smart cities that people have got, the planners have got, the developers have got.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Professor Maina, and indeed, thank you to all of our keynote presenters in participating in the opening ceremony and the keynote presentations for AFRICON 2021, the IEEE Region 8 conference, which was originally planned to be in Tanzania, but had to go virtual due to COVID pandemic restrictions. So now I would like to close this, this session and encourage all of our conference attendees to participate in some of the other breakout paper presentation sessions that are ongoing now until the end of the day tomorrow. And we will see you again for the keynote speeches that will be delivered tomorrow at 9 a.m. East African time. Yes, so thank you, everybody. And to close us off, as I hear that some of the videos that I played didn't have any sound, I will replay some of the cultural videos and the Tanzanian national anthem to close this session. So thank you, Prof. Masanja, thank you, Prof. Maina. Thank you, Magnus Ewerbring, Dr. Magnus Ewerbring as well, and Dr. Mfupe, and also to Antonio Luque, who's the Region 8 Director for IEEE. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you.